She walked in to deposit a scholarship check, but walked out having uncovered a secret that could destroy the bank. She's 14, and today they messed with the wrong girl at the wrong branch. Monday morning in Summit Hills, Georgia, the sky was clear and crisp, with a gentle breeze sweeping through the rows of oak trees lining Main Street. Dressed in her navy blue school blazer, neatly pleated skirt, and freshly polished black leather loafers, 14-year-old Sierra Morgan walked into Cresthill Bank with a confidence rarely seen in someone her age. She wasn't there to deposit allowance money or open a student account. Today, she was there to deposit a $5,500 scholarship check, an award from the prestigious Future Scholars of Georgia, reserved for high-achieving middle school students who show strong academic promise and leadership in their communities. It wasn't just the first time Sierra had walked into a bank on her own. It was a milestone, a quiet declaration of independence. That morning, her mother, Denise Morgan, CEO of Cresthill Capital, had asked, "You sure you want to go alone? I can take you if you'd like." But Sierra had simply smiled and said, "I've got it. I earned this scholarship on my own. I want to handle it on my own, too." Her outstanding grades at Easton Heights Academy, her community service hours at the local youth center, and a heartfelt essay on financial equity and education had helped her rise above hundreds of other applicants to win the award. To Sierra, this check wasn't just money. It was proof of late-night study sessions, skipped parties for school projects, and quiet perseverance when no one was watching. As she stepped through the revolving glass doors of Cresthill Bank, Sierra felt like she was entering another world. Where the ceiling stretched high above, the marble floors felt cool beneath her feet, and the rhythmic clicking of money counters echoed in the distance. She clutched her documents, award letter, student ID, and the necessary forms, all neatly organized inside her favorite purple folder. Her heart beat faster, not out of fear, but because she recognized the importance of the moment. The little girl who once brought her piggy bank in to open her first savings account was now here, ready to make a real deposit. No mom at her side, no one to speak for her, no safety net. She walked confidently to the teller line, approaching window number 3, where a young bank employee named Micah Reed sat. Sierra offered a polite smile, silently reminding herself, "Deep breath, Sierra. You've got everything you need. You're ready for this." Because even if no one said it out loud, Sierra knew this wasn't just about depositing a check. It was her first real step into the adult world, a quiet but bold statement that she was ready. Micah Reed, the young teller behind counter number 3, took the folder from Sierra's hands. His friendly smile slowly faded as his eyes landed on the number printed on the check. His brow furrowed. He held the check up to the light, flipping it back and forth, inspecting every line of ink. $500, he repeated, his tone no longer warm. "You said this is a scholarship?" Sierra nodded, trying to remain composed. "Yes, sir. It's from the Future Scholars of Georgia. I've also brought the award letter and my school ID with me." Micah didn't respond. He stood up and walked straight toward the manager's office, carrying both the check and Sierra's neatly prepared folder with him. In that moment, a chill ran down Sierra's spine, as if the entire space around her suddenly shrank, and all sound blurred away except for the pounding in her chest. A few minutes later, the office door opened. Cheryl Whitman, branch manager, late 40s, in a sharp gray skirt suit and heels that clicked authoritatively on the tile floor, stepped out with an icy gaze. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a flawless bun, her expression unreadable. But when her eyes landed on Sierra, they hesitated for a brief second, then shifted into something else. Quiet judgment, suspicion. Sierra Morgan, correct? Cheryl asked, not waiting for an answer. She glanced over the folder, then turned to Micah and said, loud enough for nearby customers to hear, "These days, there are all kinds of fake documents floating around. We need to verify everything thoroughly. We can't just have strangers walking in here with checks like this." Each word hit Sierra's chest like a stone. Strangers? Walking in here? She did her best to keep her voice steady. "I brought all the necessary documents. This is an official scholarship from the State Department of Education. I just want to deposit it into my account." Cheryl raised an eyebrow. "With this amount in your age? And you expect us to just accept that at face value?" She motioned to Micah. Run every verification. Nothing gets processed until I personally approve it. Micah gave Sierra an apologetic look, but nodded just as he gathered her paperwork. A gentle voice came from the next window over. You earned a Future Scholars of Georgia scholarship, the woman asked kindly. Sierra turned. It was a young female teller, probably in her mid-20s, with neatly tied curly hair and a warm smile. Yes, ma'am, Sierra said softly. I went through that program too, the woman said with a smile. Don't worry, it's going to be okay. I'm Lena. Before Sierra could say anything back, Cheryl shot a cold glance in Lena's direction. Lena, focus on your own customers, she snapped. Lena lowered her head and returned to her station, but not before giving Sierra a quick, subtle wink of reassurance. A small gesture, but enough to remind Sierra that she wasn't completely alone. Still, Sierra stood frozen, her hand gripping the strap of her bag tighter. Around her, a few customers began to whisper. Glances were cast her way, sideways and sharp, as if she caused a disturbance. The feeling of isolation seeped in like cold water. No one stepped in. No one asked if she needed help. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. But something deep inside her cracked. Why are they looking at me like this? She wondered. Is it because I'm a young black girl? Because I have a check they think I shouldn't? Sierra Morgan, just 14 years old, stood in the middle of Cresthill Bank. Not as a customer, but as a suspect in their eyes. And the worst part wasn't the silence, the stares, or the humiliation. It was that they thought it was normal. Sierra was told to sit quietly off to the side, on a plastic chair near the wall. Her face remained calm, composed, but her eyes never stopped scanning the room. Just ahead of her, an elderly white couple, both dressed in upscale attire, walked into the bank. The security guard immediately smiled, opened the door for them, nodding like he was greeting royalty. Seconds later, Cheryl Whitman emerged from her office. Her expression instantly transformed. The icy demeanor vanished, replaced with a dazzling smile as she personally stepped forward. Mr. and Mrs. Holloway, so lovely to see you again, Cheryl sang, her voice suddenly syrupy sweet. She extended her hand warmly. Right this way to your private transaction suite. Today our signature clients are fast-tracked, no lines necessary. Sierra watched the scene unfold, her throat tightening. Signature? No waiting in line? She glanced up at the wall clock. Nearly 30 minutes. That's how long she'd been sitting there. Like a shadow, no explanation, no update, no one offering her even a glass of water. Not once had anyone asked if she needed to call a guardian. But the couple that just walked in, without a word, were treated like royalty. A few minutes later, a middle-aged black man in a crisp shirt and tie approached the teller. He handed over his documents for a wire transfer. The teller furrowed her brow, requested a secondary ID, then leaned over to whisper something to her colleague. After a few minutes of silent scrutiny, the man walked away. His request denied, his shoulders slumped in quiet disappointment. Not even a minute later, a young white woman arrived at the same counter with nearly identical paperwork. This time, no extra questions, no secondary ID, no whispers. The teller beamed. Let me take care of that for you right away, miss. We're prioritizing our female clients today. Sierra kept observing. White customers were met with warmth, ease, and smiles. Customers of color were met with questions, delays, and silent judgment, or outright denial. But there was one exception, Lena Carter's window. Though just a junior employee, Lena made no effort to hide her unease watching how management treated Sierra. She conducted each transaction politely, regardless of who was in front of her. When assisting an elderly black woman, Lena greeted her with warmth, handled her request gently, and never once made her feel like an inconvenience. From time to time, Lena looked up, and if her eyes met Sierra's, she would nod ever so slightly. A small gesture, but it spoke volumes. A silent message of solidarity in a storm of silence. Sierra exhaled slowly. This wasn't coincidence. It couldn't be. Every small action, from how a customer was greeted to the speed of their transaction, even the tone of voice, spoke one truth loud and clear. The color of your skin determines how you're treated. And there Sierra sat, motionless, as if forgotten. Around her, the world kept spinning, but it was a world that had no seat reserved for her. She pulled a small notebook from her bag, the one her mother always told her to carry around, in case you need to write down something important. Sierra began to write, not out of anger, but with precision. Names, times, facial expressions, exact words spoken. Like an investigative reporter, she documented everything. She didn't know yet what she would do with it, but she knew this much. When silence is weaponized against you, the smallest thing you can do is remember. The discrimination here didn't need to shout. It whispered. It lingered in glances and gestures. But today, Sierra Morgan was seeing all of it. She was still scribbling notes when she heard hurried footsteps behind her. Looking up, she caught sight of Cheryl Whitman pointing directly at her, her voice low but sharp enough for the surrounding area to hear. Keep an eye on the girl. Don't let her leave until we verify everything. We can't risk any breach of banking security. It hit like a slap. A large security guard stepped forward. No, hello. No kindness. He positioned himself directly in front of Sierra, arms crossed, towering like a sentry guarding a threat. Stay right here, he ordered, his voice flat and cold. You are not to leave this area until management clears you. Sierra froze. She glanced around. The stares were immediate and unapologetic. Customers weren't whispering anymore. They were openly murmuring, trading suspicious glances, some with eyes narrowed in judgment. A young black girl, in a school uniform, being held in a bank under security supervision? It fit a narrative far too many of them were already familiar with. A tight, burning shame surged through Sierra's chest. It thudded in her ears like a heartbeat laced with fury. She had done nothing wrong. She had walked into this place to deposit a scholarship check, the product of years of hard work and quiet perseverance. And now, she was being treated like a threat, like a liar, like a suspect. Cheryl walked past her, not even sparing a glance. But then, something unexpected happened. A desk phone nearby, sitting on the next teller's counter, suddenly began to ring. The clerk didn't reach it in time, and the system clicked over to speaker mode. The voice that rang out over the entire lobby was sharp, urgent, and unmistakably clear. Cheryl, the CEO of Meridian, just left his office. The Cresthill Capital file has been delivered. That girl is still there, right? The entire bank seemed to stop breathing. The guard's posture stiffened. Cheryl, halfway to her office, froze. And Sierra? She blinked, confused, as the room slowly began to turn its attention not just to the color of her skin, but to the power her name might hold. Sierra froze, inching back toward the wall, her heart pounding. Meridian? The name hit her like a weight in her chest. She remembered it clearly. Meridian was the name her mother, Denise Morgan, had mentioned during a late-night dinner just a few weeks ago. Meridian Banking Group wasn't just any competitor. It was a competitor, the #1 rival to Cresthill Capital. The financial empire her mother led with an ironclad commitment to transparency and ethics. With nearly 20 years of Wall Street experience, Denise Morgan wasn't just a respected investment strategist. She was the powerhouse CEO of Cresthill Capital, the parent company that owned Cresthill Bank branches across the country. From the central headquarters in Summit Hills, Denise had worked tirelessly to build a financial system rooted in fairness, trust, and accountability. And now, right here, inside one of her own branches, Sierra had just heard proof that something was very, very wrong. Cheryl Whitman, a mere branch manager, wasn't just acting on prejudice. She was hiding something. And Sierra? She had accidentally become a threat that needed to be neutralized. The security guard still stood close, arms crossed, but his eyes had started to shift. Uneasy, an elderly customer nearby muttered, loud enough to be heard, "I don't know what's going on, but the way they're treating that girl, it's disgraceful." Sierra clutched her notebook tightly, her fear melting away, replaced by something colder, sharper. Focus, resolve, clarity. She understood now. This wasn't just about a scholarship check. This was bigger, and she was holding a key piece of the puzzle. She stood still, her back pressed against the cold marble wall. The words from the phone still echoed in her mind. The Cresthill Capital file has been delivered. That girl is still there, right? Each phrase dropped into place like puzzle pieces, confirming every instinct that had prickled since the moment she walked through the revolving door. Then, fate added one final piece. The back door of the bank creaked open. A man stepped inside, tall, sharply dressed in a silver-gray suit, hair slicked back like every strand had been arranged with precision. Sierra recognized him instantly. Brandon Whitmore, CEO of Meridian Banking Group, the fiercest corporate rival to her mother's company. He didn't enter through the main lobby. Instead, he veered down the hallway and disappeared into a side office with frosted glass, barely noticeable unless you were watching. A few seconds later, Cheryl Whitman followed, clutching a thick leather-bound file. She looked down as she walked, shoulders hunched, glancing over her shoulder before closing the door and locking it. Sierra's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't a meeting. This was a secret. And by sheer coincidence, or maybe fate, she had seen everything. Sierra shifted slightly, finding the best angle she could from her unofficial holding cell. Through the frosted glass panel, the silhouettes were blurry, but just clear enough to catch Brandon Whitmore gesturing sharply at the documents and Cheryl Whitman nodding, tapping the folder like she was confirming the quality of a rare artifact. This wasn't just a secret. This was betrayal. Sierra's heart pounded, but her mind had never felt sharper. She'd listened to enough of her mother's high-level meetings. She'd heard about data protection, corporate ethics, and the gravity of internal security breaches. And now, she was watching a bank manager, in a place where trust is everything, sell out her own company for a private deal behind closed doors. Then suddenly, Cheryl opened the office door. In her hand was a small, silver USB drive. She slipped it quickly into the inside pocket of her blazer. Her eyes darted nervously around the room and landed squarely on Sierra. 1 second. One locked glance. It was all it took for Sierra to know. Cheryl realized she had seen everything. There was no alarm, no panic, no shouting, just a silence that screamed. Brandon Whitmore exited to the side door, walking with the cold confidence of someone who never intended to be seen. Cheryl, meanwhile, walked back to the teller area, smiling, greeting customers like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just handed classified material to the CEO of a rival bank. But Sierra knew, and this time, she wasn't just committing it to memory. She opened her leather-bound notebook, the one her mother always told her to carry to record anything important. With calm precision, she began to write everything: time, physical descriptions, behavior, directions taken, the object exchange. She sketched a small diagram where she stood where the tellers were, where the frosted glass office sat, the side exit, the security guard's post. Every arrow marked with a timestamp. At the bottom of the page, she wrote, "The only witness to everything, me. No cameras, no audio, but I have this." She closed the notebook, not locked, just gently folded, and slid it inside her blazer pocket. Her other hand rested calmly on her bag, her posture composed, as if nothing unusual had occurred. From across the lobby, Cheryl glanced at her again. Just a second, but in those eyes, sharp, cold, calculating, Sierra could see the gears turning. Cheryl suspected something, but Sierra was ready. She kept her expression neutral, eyes relaxed, lips still. No panic, no resistance. Invisible again, just how Cheryl seemed to want her. She remembered something her mother once said: "If you see something wrong, don't shout. Observe, record, and wait for the right moment to act." Sierra Morgan was no longer just a 14-year-old trying to prove she could handle a scholarship check. She was a silent witness to something far more dangerous. And though she sat alone, held in a corner like some kind of threat, she now held a secret powerful enough to unravel everything this bank was hiding. A soft chime echoed from the front entrance. Someone new had just walked in, but Sierra didn't turn around. She didn't have to. She knew she was about to stop being alone. The glass doors rotated once more, but this time, no one in the lobby dared breathe when the woman stepped through. Denise Morgan, 43, CEO of Cresthill Capital. Didn't need to raise her voice or stamp her heels to silence the room. She didn't need a nameplate or a title card. She was a name. A navy blue power suit, custom tailored to perfection, polished black stilettos, and eyes sharp enough to slice through steel. She radiated control, authority, and presence. Denise strode into the bank lobby. No check-in, no receptionist. She'd stood before the U.S. Senate to testify on national finance reform. A branch like Cresthill Bank wasn't about to slow her down. Her gaze scanned the room, then froze. Sierra, alone, separated, unattended. Denise's eyes darkened. "Sierra," she called, her voice barely above a whisper, but it was enough to bring the entire lobby to a halt. Sierra turned on the edge of tears, but she held her gaze. "Mom, I'm okay," she said, clutching her notebook tightly. "But you need to hear what happened." She flipped the notebook open quickly, turning to the page she'd filled with observations. 10:12 a.m., Cheryl met with Brandon Whitmore in conference room B. Folder marked confidential. Tense body language. Denise scanned the notes, her face calm, unreadable, but her eyes turned to ice. She didn't speak to anyone. She didn't ask questions. She walked straight to her daughter, laid a firm hand on her shoulder like a shield, then locked eyes with Cheryl Whitman, frozen behind the teller counter. "Are you the branch manager here?" Denise asked, her voice smooth and forged from steel. "Why, yes, I'm Cheryl Whitman, branch operations supervisor." "Good. Then you're the one who will answer this." Denise didn't blink. "Why was my daughter, Sierra Morgan, held here for over 2 hours without the right to contact anyone, without a clear explanation, while you treated every white customer like royalty?" The lobby was silent, frozen like glass under tension. Cheryl stammered. We're just following security protocol. We've had several fraudulent checks come through recently." "And what about your private meeting at 10:12 a.m. with Brandon Whitmore?" Denise added, her voice crisp and level, like she was reciting facts before a boardroom full of investors. "Where you handed him a folder labeled confidential." A collective inhale swept through the room. Everyone stopped moving. Cheryl paled. I don't know what you're talking about." Denise turned to Sierra, her voice lower, yet firmer. "Let me see your notes, sweetheart." Without waiting another second, Sierra pulled out her brown leather notebook, flipped to the page from earlier, and said in a voice so calm it was almost chilling. 10:12 a.m. Cheryl Whitman met with Brandon Whitmore, CEO of Meridian Banking Group, direct competitor of Cresthill Capital, the parent company of this institution. A thick document folder was exchanged, dark reddish-brown in color, labeled confidential. A USB drive accompanied it, approximately 2 inches in length. She paused, locking eyes with Cheryl. "You said your daughter didn't belong here," Sierra continued, her voice trembling for the first time, but not with fear. "But it's you destroying this place." At that exact moment, Denise's phone buzzed in her blazer pocket. She opened the message quickly. "Internal security from Cresthill Capital is en route to this branch. I've also informed the chairman of Cresthill Bank's board about the irregularities here. You'll be explaining yourself." The silence in the bank lobby was deafening, like the air had just been sucked out of the room. Denise turned to her daughter. "Well done, Sierra. I'm proud of you." Sierra gave a faint smile, not because it was over, but because she knew this battle had just begun, and she was no longer alone. The entire lobby of Cresthill Bank felt frozen in time. Every gaze was locked on one point, where Denise Morgan, calm, composed, but utterly unshakable, was now standing face-to-face with Cheryl Whitman. "Cheryl Whitman," Denise said, her voice slicing through the silence like a blade. "You didn't just violate bank procedure by unlawfully detaining my daughter. You also colluded with our corporate rival to hand over confidential data. 2 actions, one rooted in discrimination, the other in corporate espionage, have no place in a legitimate financial institution." Cheryl was sweating now, her lips pressed tight, clinging to the last scraps of control. "You have no authority to fire me," she hissed, trying to steady herself. "I'm the branch manager. You're just a customer." Denise raised one corner of her mouth, not a smile, but the signal of an ending. "Unfortunately," she said, pulling a thick folder from the inside of her blazer, stamped with a gold seal of Cresthill Capital. "I'm not a customer. I'm the vice president of strategic investments for Cresthill Capital, the parent company that owns every Cresthill Bank branch. Hiring authority and termination falls within my jurisdiction." A soft gasp echoed somewhere in the lobby. "Security," Denise said, turning her head ever so slightly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it struck like thunder. "Please escort Mrs. Cheryl Whitman off the premises. Immediately. Retrieve her building access badge, company phone, and any digital storage devices she has on her." The same two security guards, those who had once stood by idly as Sierra was detained, now awkwardly stepped toward Cheryl. One of them cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we'll need you to come with us, Ms. Whitman." Cheryl froze for a moment, then suddenly shouted, "You can't do this to me. I've worked here for 17 years. I have connections. I have influence." Denise didn't even blink. "And you'll need a very good lawyer because of it." Murmurs rippled through the room. A few customers quietly clapped. Others pulled out their phones to record. Sierra stood beside her mother, wide-eyed, heart pounding, but not out of fear, out of pride. As Cheryl was escorted out, she turned her head sharply, eyes blazing with fury as they locked onto Sierra, the same girl she belittled and dismissed. But Sierra didn't flinch. She simply stood tall, gaze steady, head held high. "History won't remember those who sat in power the longest," Denise said, her voice calm but ringing clearly through the lobby. "It will remember those who had the courage to speak the truth." And with that, the bank doors closed behind Cheryl Whitman. This time, no one stood between Sierra and her place in the world. 1 week later, the atmosphere inside Cresthill Bank had completely shifted. The whispers were gone. In their place, anticipation. Change. True to her word, Denise Morgan hadn't handled the incident as a one-off. She went to the root. At an emergency meeting held at the very same branch, Denise stepped up to the podium, addressing the full staff. Sierra stood nearby, not as a child who had been humiliated, but as a witness to transformation. "We are not just replacing people," Denise said firmly. "We are replacing a mindset. There is no room here for prejudice or for glances that measure someone's worth by their age, their appearance, or their skin color." Her eyes scanned the room. "And I want to begin by honoring someone who didn't turn away, even when no one else was watching." All eyes turned toward Lena Carter, the young teller, the only one who had shown Sierra kindness that day. Lena's face flushed, surprised to hear her name. "Ms. Lena Carter," Denise continued with a warm, resolute smile, "as of today, you are being promoted to Customer Services Manager of Cresthill Bank's Summit Hills branch. Because kindness should never be rare, it should be standard." Applause erupted across the room. Lena stood slowly, eyes misty. I was just doing the right thing," she said quietly. "Exactly," Denise replied. "Which is why you're the one who should be leading others on how to do what's right." At the same time, Cresthill Bank announced the launch of the Faces of Fairness Initiative, a mandatory new training program for all employees, focusing on diversity awareness, equitable service, and ethical responsibility. No longer just words framed on a wall. This time, it was action. Sierra watched it all unfold in silence. She didn't need to say a word, because everything had already spoken for her. In her small leather notebook, she added a single line. One small action, one kind look, can spark a movement of reform. On the ride home, Denise held her daughter's hand. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. "You didn't lower your head." Sierra squeezed her mother's hand. "I learned that from you." The Cresthill branch was no longer a symbol of injustice. It was becoming a model of accountability, of second chances, of change. 3 weeks later, the name Sierra Morgan was no longer unfamiliar in the halls of Easton Heights Academy. Today, Sierra wasn't just a 9th grade student. She was the youngest keynote speaker ever invited to address the New Voices, New Action Symposium, a statewide gathering of business leaders, educators, and students from across Georgia. She walked up to the podium with steady steps, wearing her school uniform neatly pressed, her familiar black notebook tucked against her chest. Every eye followed her, not just because of her age, but because of what she had endured and what she had stood for. 3 weeks ago, Sierra began, her voice calm and clear, I walked into a bank to deposit a scholarship check. Instead, I was detained in a corner like someone who didn't deserve to be trusted, just because I was a black girl, alone, carrying a dream I'd earned on my own. A wave of silence spread through the auditorium. Sierra paused, letting the words settle. Her gaze swept across the room of motionless faces. I wrote everything down, not to complain, but to prove that even when you don't have power, you still have a voice. She raised a notebook into the spotlight. This isn't just filled with notes. This is evidence. This is my voice when no one was listening. And now, it has changed an entire system. The first round of applause broke out. Then it spread, building in momentum, echoing across the room. Sierra smiled, but she didn't stop. I don't share this story for pity. I share it to remind you that injustice doesn't only live in faraway places. It can happen in the quietest towns, in the fanciest banks, to a 14-year-old girl just trying to do the right thing. She took a small step back, her eyes firm. We, the youth, don't have to wait until we grow up to take action. We can be the change right now. All it takes is one voice, one right choice, and a heart that isn't afraid to be judged. After that symposium, Sierra received hundreds of messages from students, those who had quietly endured prejudice, never knowing how to begin speaking up. Her story was picked up by local television. But the most unexpected moment came when she received a letter. Sierra Morgan had been appointed as the student ambassador for the Georgia State Council on Diversity and Educational Equity. She was no longer just a girl who stood in the corner of a bank. She was now the voice that helped others rise from their silence. But for Sierra, the greatest honor wasn't the media attention, the awards, or even the state-level appointment. It was when a younger student approached her quietly after class, eyes filled with hope, clutching a small notebook to her chest. "Excuse me," the girl whispered, voice trembling with excitement. "I've started writing in my notebook too. Like you? Do you think I can make a difference like you did?" Sierra knelt down, her smile warm and steady. "You don't have to change the world alone," she said gently. "But if you start, then we're already changing it together."